find the way home. And I think we need each other. Why don't you take my hand and let's walk together? Take my hand and try. It's a long road, we can walk it together. Take my hand and try.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Life Now. I am your co-host, Marty Carroll, along with my beautiful wife, Michelle, our other co-host.
Hello.
And we are so glad to be with you again. Been a couple weeks since we've been able to get in and get some things recorded for you, but excited to be back and just looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much for the response we're getting, both on Facebook and your phone calls. I think you got a phone call the other day you wanted to mention.
I do. I want to give a shout out to Miss Lynetta. Thank you for calling. Thank you for your wonderful comments. Thank you for being a fan of the show. And glad that it's ministering to you.
Yeah, that is awesome. We're so glad to hear from you guys and the phone calls we get and responses again on Facebook. That Facebook page is Blind Sighted. If you want to look that up, try to put up some thoughts of inspiration for the day, and we also post the show on there as well, as it can also be found on YouTube. Just search out Life Now with Marty Carroll, and you should find it there on YouTube. We got, 6-7 episodes up on there right now. I got a lot of hits on it, and we're excited about that. So thank you guys. Glad that it is being viewed and being helpful. We just want to keep providing that for you, give you some guidance and walk through life with you. So let's just jump in for tonight. We got some comments on the episode we did with about relationships and the narcissism and things like that. So we thought we would just throw out some ideas tonight on marriage, and then we've got a couple of interviews that are going to be coming up in the weeks to come with some couples, including us, and just going to try to provide you with some entertaining stories and some real life experiences, and just see where that goes and see if it kind of hits home with you, and talk to some folks and get some insights into their experience. So tonight we're just going to talk about maybe in a different way than what maybe you've been to marriage conferences before, and you've heard all these teachings on this and that, and as a therapist for a number of years we've done marriage conferences, and I always like to take a little bit of a different twist on it, just get some information maybe that it's not mainstream necessarily. We hear a lot of the main core stuff about love and submission and things like that, and communication. That's always the big one. How men communicate differently from women. In fact, you were listening to something the other night. That comedian, what was that? Acts 2:38 ministry. Maybe, does that sound right? Mm-hmm. That he was really sharing some entertaining insights into marriage through the vehicle of comedy. So anyway, we're just going to do some things tonight, talk about a few ideas. You know us, and we're really big on belief. Belief is core, is central to our being and our living. What you believe is important, all the way from what you believe, who you believe God is, to how you believe this world should work, what you believe about other people, what you believe about situations that you experience day in, day out. Somewhere embedded in your thought processes is the belief, which generates those emotional responses. You've heard us talk about that 1,000 times, but it is so true. And belief is what takes you places. Belief is what makes or breaks you in situations. So we want to explore just for a few minutes, kind of a starting point there, the belief about marriage. And starting with, what do you believe marriage is? Do you have any thoughts on what you believe marriage might be?
I guess it depends on what day you ask me.
Yeah, really.
I mean, I feel like our marriage evolves daily, over time, and truly being a woman, and I can say this because I am a woman, that, hormones play a lot.
You think?
No, I'm just joking. I mean, as far as fundamental beliefs about marriage, I would have to say though, my view of marriage has grown, matured, hopefully, over the years. But I do believe that it's a dynamic process. I do believe that, as you learn each other and begin to grow, it does change.
Yeah, and I like the words you used when you started, evolve. It evolves day to day to day. And it should. That's the thing. Unfortunately, we see so many marriages that devolve, if you will.
Yeah.
The longer it goes on, you lose all the things you started out with. And that's not the way love or marriage is designed to work. Marriage is designed to grow. And it's, you have to believe, here comes one of those beliefs, that you have to do things to nurture it. Left to itself, just not doing anything in the relationship doesn't nurture it. It's almost like plants, that requires watering, requires a little talking, a little sunshine. We may share the analogy of the light, because that was really good that you had the other day. It requires light, it requires water, it requires some nurturing, just as plants do, marriage does, in our words, in our deeds. Don't believe that you can just say I do and then go on about life, because it just doesn't work that way. It can create a lot of deficits in the marriage. There are needs. There are some God-given needs that we have, and in order to help the relationship be nurtured, you have to meet those needs. Now, we're not designed to meet every need, which is another belief that you have to explore. What exactly is my role, and what should my partner expect out of me? When we do a lot of premarital counseling, expectations, what do I expect out of this relationship, often goes unspoken until you get into a situation in marriage where you go, wait a minute, I expected you to do this. No, wait, I expected you to do this. That's not the way we've done this. And it creates this, confusion.
Or the way a person's brought up.
Yes.
A lot of times we bring that baggage of what we see our parents do. I mean, that's how we learn, right? And so from that perspective, we also deal with a lot of, when we're doing marriage counseling, we see, when we ask people, well, why do you believe this way? Well, that's what my mom and dad did, or that's what I saw. That's all they know as far as marriage.
Right. And then it's one of my favorite questions when you're sitting down with a couple, and you look at each of them, you address each of them with this question: what did you see in your parents that you would like to have in your relationship? And then the other side of that is, what did you see in your parents that you do not want to bring into that relationship? And we get some pretty interesting answers, to say the least. To say the least. You've got people who come from abusive families, and mom and daddy yelled all the time. I don't want to do that. Dad was never home. He was always off on business or golfing, or who knows. He was just absent. I don't want that. Dad was real harsh with mom. He didn't speak to her in loving ways, and it just didn't feel right. I don't want to do that as a husband. Just different things like that we hear. So you have to take that into consideration, because sometimes the expectation can be a dysfunctional pattern. You can think, well, I expect my wife to stay home all the time and only do housework and have the babies and have supper cooked when I come in, and that don't always work. Right. Especially when you've got a wife who maybe wants to seek education and wants to raise kids, but views it as a mutual effort, which should be. Exactly. So you can have these expectations and beliefs that you really need to explore in a premarital setting before you get into them. Now, you can't maybe necessarily uncover all of them, in 6 or 8 weeks, but you can uncover a number of them that will keep you from stepping on a landmine.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I've found that just the simple question in premarital counseling of, what do you expect this marriage to look like? When you ask that question beforehand, and and I wish that I had done this previously, because it just makes sense. That's just a question that does need to be asked before you marry someone. What do you expect of me? What are your expectations once I say I do? You don't want to wait until after you're married to find out what those expectations are of you.
That's right. And the big ones, number of children.
Yes.
Sex drives. Everybody's sex drives is different, and so there's a expectation of that. Who's going to take care of what responsibilities in the home?
Right.
Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to manage the money?
Right.
The list goes on. What do you expect? And to have those kind of conversations beforehand can help.
So what advice do you give to people who didn't ask those questions? Now they're in a marriage situation and there's conflict because the expectations are not being met.
Take cover. That's what I would say. No, find a mediator and sit down and go, you know what, these are some things we did not explore. And we need to explore them now, and we need to see what we can do to help everything line up. Because a belief that you need to have about marriage is the fact that it is give and take. There's a giving and taking that takes place. Sometimes we just have to give a little, as well as take. We need to learn how to receive from our partners, but at the same time, what are we willing to give up? What are we willing to give up? What are our partner willing to give up? So it's a dance. It's a dance of give and take, and you sit down and you work through it like adults. Okay, I can do that, because you're never looking for a win-lose situation. A lot of compromises, there's a win-lose. You always want to seek a win-win, because you're in this together. And when you're dealing with that type of conflict, you're trying to figure out, well, what do we need to do? You have to ask the question, what's best for us? What is going to work? What's going to help our household work? What's going to make our marriage work? How do we do this together? How do we both win with this expectation? And when you can put it in that type of frame, you tend to have a lot more success. Don't go on the defensive, because here's another belief that you need to have. Always believe the best about your partner. And there are exceptions. I understand. There are things that go on. There are people involved in things that are detrimental to the relationship. But you, as best you can, you always want to believe the best about your partner, and that they have your best interest at heart as well. And that's a mutual thing. And again, there's exceptions. You've got domestic violence and addictions and things.
What about if you're with a narcissist? Like we talked about on the last show.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. That would require just coming in and sitting down, let's exploring the degree to which it exists and how bad it's affecting, and then how to rise above or how to remove yourself from the situation, in a healthy, in a God-fearing way. You have to be careful with those situations. You really do, but they can be worked out. But believe the best about your partner. Believe that they have your best interest in heart, and they're not going to do anything intentionally to hurt you, to mislead you, to those types of things. Never believe it, and then if it comes out that something did happen, well, then deal with it. But try to always maintain a good belief about your spouse. Believe that marriage is a covenant, and it's not just a covenant between husband and wife, but it's a covenant between you as a couple and God. It's a covenant, and it's also probably the one relationship on earth that probably gives us the best example of God's grace lived out. Because marriage requires a lot of grace. You are under a spotlight with two people, and you see everything, and you have to live with everything. And the grace that should be exchanged on a daily basis is just a great example of God's grace for us. And you're laughing, so go ahead.
I'm just laughing because, just thinking about our own marriage, and the special needs on both sides, with your vision, and then with my paralysis and memory loss from the brain tumor and the surgeries, and then the subsequent surgery and of the hysterectomy, and now we're dealing with the hot flashes and the hormones.
And I still believe the best in her. I still believe the best.
And I'm so grateful that I have a Christian husband.
Lots of grace and patience. But it's all good because it's for you. I have to be in such a way that facilitates your ability to move forward and grow through it. If I do something that creates a hindrance, then I'm not acting on your best interest, nor am I acting in accordance with the love of God. If I can't be patient and kind and the things that 1 Corinthians 13 tells us about love, then I'm missing the mark for you, and I'm not helping you deal with anything.
I have compassion, though, for women who don't have Christian husbands, and for women who don't have husbands who are compassionate and understanding, and loving, because I can tell you right now, I would hurt someone. If it wasn't for the fact that you were so compassionate, I would hurt you.
I get that. I believe that. No doubt. Because, hormones and those types of things, they come into play. And guys, you know what? Do yourself a favor and educate yourself on it. Don't think you know, and if your wife is acting in such a way you can tell she's struggling, don't get all bent out of shape and go to ranting and raving, because you're dealing with something that you don't know anything about. And you need to take the time to learn. Do some reading, visit your wife's gynecologist, something. Get you some education on the idea of hormones and figure out what you can do to help her as she deals with it. And that could be at any point in life, pre-hysterectomy, post-hysterectomy, just at any time. They're emotional creatures. God designed it that way. There's just more emotion there. And sometimes we don't understand that because we're the rational thinker, analyze, fix it. And sometimes the emotional language just does not come naturally. And don't let me hear you say, well, I just don't get it, and that's not the way, it's one way I was raised. Well, it may not have been the way you were raised, and you may not understand it, but take a chance to learn about it. And just because you were raised a certain way, don't mean you have to stay a certain way. There is change, and we have to be able to change. And when it's in regard to our wives, we have a God-given responsibility. And again, I love that scripture. It has just jumped out at me about where Peter says, men, love your husbands, lest your prayers be hindered.
Love your wives.
Oh, thank you. Love your wives. I'm sorry. Love your wives, lest your prayers
Let's get that
be
scripture
hindered.
right.
Let's get it right. That could create a whole other show. Love them lest you be hindered in your prayer life. And you don't want that.
Right.
You don't want that. You're the priest of your home, and you have the responsibility to love. Along with love comes patience and understanding. And it's a language that's hard for some guys to learn. It really is. But God says, men, love your wives. Okay, that's the emotional aspect. That's hard to gather, but you can do it. It is doable. You just got to slow down, forget what you think you know, and grab hold of the truth of the matter.
And honestly, I don't know that I've ever said this to you, but the fact that you are the example of the word, like Proverbs, and you sing the praises of your wife, even when I don't deserve it, even when I'm in the middle of a hormonal meltdown, and you sing my praises. And when you do that, it always brings me back into alignment. It may not be an instantaneous, sometimes it is, and I think sometimes you see that, an instantaneous transformation, but there's always a pulling back. It just brings me back into my role as wife, and it's a reminder for me that you're doing your part. And so, yes, I may be dealing with some hormones, but that doesn't give me a right to act a certain way. And so I do try to come back and apologize if apologies are required, or maybe try to, be more rational.
That's hard to do. It is. That's hard to do when you're dealing with the emotional part.
And for me, being a caregiver, I don't know if most women struggle with this, but for me, the struggle is real as far as receiving. I can give it all. I can give love all day long. It's the receiving part that I have trouble with, and I have to go back and I have to read scripture and I have to remind myself that I don't know, maybe that it's okay to be on the receiving end of that, because the majority of my life I've spent being the giver of that, and so it's a new concept that's foreign to me.
Right.
To receive it, and I don't know. So yeah, thank you.
Well,
On air, thank you.
You're so welcome. Can y'all tell where we are in life? Life now? It's it's just easy. It's just easy. I don't know what else to say. You're welcome. I received that, and
Yay.
you're welcome, and it
Okay.
will continue. And that's probably a pretty good transition point in talking about the how the hormones or how a certain behavior or something may affect us. I'm trying to say, like if conflict gets created, it would be real easy. Take the example that we're speaking of. It would be very easy for me to get very angry and go, wait a minute. Where's the love? Or why can't you just be nice? Or all those things that go along with that. It would be real easy to go, where is that? What about me? What about me? And you could get very angry. And now here's one of those subtle ways that the enemy wants to come in and create division. And this happens at in the evening sometime, and you start stewing on that, and you go to bed mad.
Yeah.
And what does the Word tell us? The Word tells us
Not to let the sun set on your anger.
exactly, don't go to bed mad at one another.
Yeah.
Because just by the very act of doing that, you begin to create a gulf, and you begin to create a negative belief about your spouse that begins to carry over into the days to come. And every night you do this, every night you go to bed angry about something, whether you're the wife or the husband, doesn't matter, you're creating a little bit wider gulf, and you're getting entrenched in your mind a stronghold or a vain imagination against your partner. Now, if you'll stop and you'll think about this, you'll go, oh, that makes sense. Because it does. It goes over time. That's what begins to happen. And so you've got to guard yourself against that. Work that out before the sun goes down. Or at least do your part of letting it go and making things right.
And something that's important to emphasize here is just because you don't let the sun go down on your anger doesn't mean that you have to agree.
That's right.
Because there's been times that before bed we'll say, okay, we can agree to disagree on this subject.
Right.
We're just not going to be mad about it. It's not something that's worthy of being upset or angry over.
Right.
We're just going to agree to disagree.
Right. And, offer that forgiveness to them. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. No intent. Make the apologies. Make activate forgiveness.
Right.
Activate forgiveness. Because it's such a subtle way that the enemy has of dividing us. And in God, in His infinite wisdom, that's why that verse is in there. He created us. He knows how we are. And He knows what is detrimental, to a marriage. And you can apply that to any relationship. That's not just marriage. That can be with anything. Make it right, or do your part to make it right with that person you may be at odds with. Don't go to bed mad. It just doesn't help matters at all.
Well, it sure doesn't help you as a person.
That's right.
Because, like you said, it creates that negative place, and that negativity feeds upon itself, and it just grows into a monster.
It does. Yeah, creates this endless
So
loop.
even if you don't do it for your spouse, do it for yourself.
Do it for yourself.
Do it for yourself, exactly.
Yeah, because forgiveness has a mutual benefit. It's not just setting the other person free, but it's creating a freedom from you, from this emotional cancer that can sit up and over time just be destructive. We've talked before, stuff you hold on. I think at the root of most depression and maybe even anxieties is unforgiveness. People that have held on to unforgiveness for far too long. That's at the root of a lot of depression.
And fear. Fear seems to be a big one.
Right.
There's so many fears out there.
Mm-hmm. In the last couple minutes, we talked about husbands loving your wives. Maybe throw out the idea of wives respecting your husbands. I put up a post the other day, something to, I don't know if I can say it word for word, but something to the effect of, wives, tell your husbands, just because you think he wants to hear that, doesn't mean you don't need to share those words, because what you think he wants to hear is actually what he actually needs to hear. I think I really messed that up.
Yeah,
but,
you lost me.
But words of encouragement, words of love, those type of things. Men need to hear that. That's a part of that respect issue. A few strokes of the ego. We're pretty easy. We're pretty simple. It doesn't take much. But
You say that.
That's right. It's harder than it sounds, right? But the respect issue, that's a big deal. And sometimes we try to, as a wife, you may well try to play more emotion. You're speaking in that emotional language. We don't really get it, or not all guys get it, because I think sometimes our relationship's a little backwards with that. And so you have to figure out what says respect to your husband. And if you wonder, and the guys, girls, both of you, ask your spouse, husbands, ask your wives, what speaks love to you? And there's a great book out called Love Languages you can check out. And then wives, ask your husbands, what does respect mean to you? How can I show you respect? If you don't know, ask. It's a pretty simple conversation. And begin to practice those things, because it takes effort. It does not come naturally. It takes some work. And all of it begins to kind of fall into place if God is at the top of your priority list. Seeking you first, the kingdom of God, and His righteousness, and everything else is going to fall into place. Well, seek Him first, get all that in line, and then the understanding and the ability to do the things you need to do kind of fall in place.
I love that scripture.
I do too. Very important. We're probably going to hit on that in the future. Thank you so much for joining us. Our time is up. Hopefully this has been helpful. We're going to come back, have some things on marriage for you in the future. So God bless you, and we will talk with you again next week.